All right, you guys, welcome back to another episode of Trauma Saved My Life. This is where we sit with warriors who walk through the darkness and come out building light. Today's guest is Naishah Ebanks. She's a survivor whose story is as painful as it is powerful. At just 11 years old, Naishah experienced unimaginable abuse at the hands of those who were supposed to protect her. She lost her innocence, endured manipulation, and faced rejection, all before she could fully understand the weight of what was happening. But she didn't stop there. She survived 3 suicide attempts, picked up the pieces, and is now she's sharing her story with the world. She's published a memoir and is building an advocacy platform for others like her to reclaim their voice. So let's welcome Naishah to the show. How's it going?
Oh, it's going good. How about it? How's it going for you?
Really good. Busy with life and just life in general. It's got a lot going on all the time. It doesn't stop for any of us, but we got to keep grinding and keep pushing. So, it is what it
Absolutely
is.
agree. It doesn't stop.
Yeah. So you've got an interesting story, and I want to make sure that we get it told the right way. So if you don't mind, I can get started on these questions.
Absolutely. Let's go.
All right. So let's go back to the beginning. Can you kind of share a little bit about what your childhood was like and how things were, you know, growing up for you? Just
So I was placed in the CPS system at before I was 1 year old. My biological parents did not want me. Um, they had a child prior to me. Born in Bronx, New York. My mother just couldn't do it in that time, 80s, projects.
right.
Dad wasn't around. My mom made the choice to put me and my sister in the system.
Hmm.
Um, we were bounced around till we were about 3 and 4, and we were placed with our biggest predators,
Oh, okay. Um,
um, which was
okay.
about 87, 88.
Okay. Uh, what year were you born, if you don't mind me
I'm
asking?
84.
84. Okay, okay. I'm 87, so I'm right behind
Okay.
you. I'm from the
Yeah.
same era. Yeah, it was
When I
quite a
say
time.
84, my stomach hurts. Like, oh my God.
Yeah, you got to spin that wheel quite a bit on the age things now, right?
Yeah, really. So, but we got into our adopted parents' care in about 87, 88.
Mhm.
We were legally adopted in 91. Um, it was hard. It was hard. My adopted father, just very, very sexually violent.
Mhm.
He would like this is all in my book. He would bite our fingers for punishment. He would bite our lips. He would drink. He would get us drunk at an early age.
Mhm.
I don't want to disclose too much because I'd just be giving away my book. But
Right, right.
it was hard. Eventually, as 90% of traumatized children do, behaviors start to occur.
Mhm.
Behaviors that other people don't understand why they're happening. So eventually, I got placed in residential.
What is
From
residential?
So it's I started in psychiatric in like Four Winds Psychiatric Center in Katona, New York. And then I went into a group home. Um they call them like residential treatment centers,
Mhm.
residential treatment facilities. The one that I was in was for mental health. In Yonkers, New York. It's called Leak and Watts. They've been in the news, a few times for actually killing kids. Their methods very, very, very cruel. So I grew up without a lot of love. I grew up in just trauma and violence. I finally met my mom when I was 13 years old while I was in a group home
For the first time? That was your
for
first
the
time
first
meeting her?
time.
Okay.
For the first time. Um, Within the New York State gave her custody of me, although I'm still
Mhm.
legally adopted. New York State gave custody of her with me. She moved me to Massachusetts. Within 6 months, she had given me up. She placed me back in the system.
Mhm.
That was my first That was my first suicide attempt.
I see. Okay.
Um,
Well, let me see. So, uh, what year was that again? You said
I met
in
my
that?
mom, my biological mom,
Yeah.
in like 98.
Oh, 98.
Yeah,
Okay.
like 97, 98. I was like 13, so it was like 97.
Okay. So before we get into that, I want to back up a little bit because at 11 years old, you experienced abuse that really no child should face. Are you able to share a little bit about that and kind of how that shaped the way you saw yourself growing up, maybe?
Absolutely. When I was 11 years old, me and my older sister ran away. We just got tired, just you can only take so much.
Hmm.
We ran away and we were in the park of downtown Mount Vernon, New York. Um, we were with some boys that my sister knew from school.
Hmm.
And she left me in the middle of downtown, Mount Vernon, on the back of, I remember it clear as day, on the back of a boy's bike, riding like, oh, you remember the pegs on like the
Right.
BMX bikes?
Yeah, you stand
The
on the
last,
pegs in the back.
yeah, last memory I have is her riding down the hill on the back of this boy's bike on the pegs. I was, I'm naturally small. I'm very small, for my, even now for my age, like I'm 5'4". I'm tiny, never been
Hmm.
big. Um, so I was scared. So I started making my way home. A car pulls up beside me. Grown man. Now that I look back, I can see, that he was late 20s,
Hmm.
Um, he asked me where I was going. I said I wanted to go home. It's like, take me. He knew I was small. He knew I was a young girl, you
Do
know.
you think he was out looking? Like, was he, being a predator, or was it kind of something that happened by chance, you think?
It was by chance.
Okay.
He just so happened to be driving down that road at the time.
Hmm.
And he see me. We all know how men do. They see someone walking down the street and like, oh, okay,
Hmm.
but I look young. I'm 40 and don't look 40, you know.
Right.
So at 11, I know I looked 9 or 10, you
Hmm.
know. I got in the car. He asked me if I wanted to ride, and I got in the car. Um, Next thing you know, we pulling up to this real small house. It was, and I just was like, it's even now till this day, like 30 years later, I can still see this house.
Right.
It's a small, like yellow house. It sits back from the road a little bit. And he's like, you want to come inside? Like, sitting in the dark. It's late night in the evening. I want to go home, but I don't want to be sitting in this man's car on some random road. I have no idea where I'm at.
Mhm.
I'm like, yeah. We walk in the house. It's like you ever been in a build, like a project building, and it has like that yellow light tint? Like the light
Hmm.
is like yellow.
Is
It
it
was,
like the shell or whatever that goes over the light bulb, you mean? And
no,
then kind
like
of
the
dingy or
color of the light, the luminescent of the light is like a
oh, okay.
yellow.
Yeah. Yeah.
If you ever go into like the projects in New York, they're always like are yellow, and then when the light starts to dim, it gets like a really dark yellow.
Hmm.
That's how it was in his house.
Okay.
And the next thing you know, he's on top of me at going like full thrust, and it
Wow.
just hurt so bad. And I'm just, little body begging him to stop and pushing him off, and he just takes my hands, put them over my head, and I can just still feel the tears now, 30 years later, falling down my tears, filling my ears, and just he did
Yeah.
his thing until he couldn't do his thing no more.
That's that's terrible. Wow.
That wasn't the
Yeah.
first. That was the first one, but it wasn't the last.
From the same person?
No,
Or you just mean just in your life, right?
in my life in general.
Well,
This was the first one.
I'm curious after that first traumatic experience, did that kind of shape the way that you saw yourself growing up or
I felt disgusted. I
like
felt
a ongoing sense of, disgust with yourself, or was it like something that would come and go, or how was that? How did you experience that?
it's been an ongoing, even up until recently, before I got into my healing, it was an ongoing feeling of disgust.
Hmm.
I felt devalued because even as a little girl, we're not, people aren't dumb, like
Right.
kids snoop, and you hear of marriage. And my adopted parents were married. I knew of the covenant of marriage, and that's what I wanted.
Hmm.
When he took that from me, because even though my adopted father was abusive, I was never penetrated. I was violated thoroughly, but I was never penetrated.
Yeah.
So I felt shame. I felt disgust. I just felt like, ugh, but after that, that's one thing that men just always just wanted from me, even as a little girl.
Yeah,
It's like they sensed it, you know,
yeah,
like,
yeah. I wonder if that's what it is. Or if it's like you said, if it's kind of that feeling that you had where it's like you felt like a target at the same time, or a combination of both things. Um, I have not been through anything like that, so I really can't say for sure. I'm just kind of speculating or whatever. But I mean, that is a terrible experience for anybody to go through at any age, let alone I think you said 11 years old. So that's beyond
my
belief.
adopted parents actually helped cover it up without knowing they covered it up.
Cover it up in a way that,
They forced me to wash away the evidence before I could even tell them what happened to me.
do you know why?
I think they knew, but the shame of what would have came, the truth that could would have came out had it been, spoken about by to the law and everything,
Yeah,
their truth, their shame, and why we ran away.
yeah. Yeah, I know it was a different time in the 90s. I mean,
Yep.
um, not to say that people weren't getting in trouble for things like that, but it was definitely, it wasn't as, what do you say? It wasn't as mainstream, I guess, as, exposing predators for what they truly are.
Yep.
It was a little bit more acceptable to kind of brush things under the rug and kind of just ignore them. It's really unfortunate because now we're seeing some of the effects that, full-grown adults are having had lived with these traumatic experiences for so long. And like you said, thankfully you've been able to heal, but there's a lot of unhealed people out there that are still dealing with those traumas.
Absolutely. And it took me, I'm still healing
Yeah, I'm
because
sure.
that just was the beginning. Like
Yeah.
I
Mm,
constantly have this argument with my oldest child. Trauma didn't stop after I had you, and he made a comment to me. We got into it. Like, he's like, oh, you're still worried about something that happened to you when you were a kid and you're 40. And I'm like, it didn't stop.
mhm.
It just kept on, even after I had you, trauma, just trauma, 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 trauma.
Right.
But it was all that I knew.
Yeah,
That was all that I was attracted to because that's all that I knew.
yeah. I'm sure there's plenty of layers to that, and hopefully we can at least dive into some of that. I know you have to share some or save some for your memoir, and hopefully people will look into that. But I kind of want to talk about, um, you mentioned surviving 3 suicide attempts.
Mhm.
I want to know like what was happening in your world during those times, and what made you feel like you just couldn't keep going,
Um, the first one was my mother showing me that she just did not love me.
right?
I was so happy to have my mom back after all the years of suffering. And she just was like, I do not care about your suffering. I don't care that it's my fault that you suffered and you're just here.
Did
That
she say
one,
those things to you?
she told me, she was like, I love you, but I don't like you. You were a mistake. She told me that like recently up until like 2021. She told me that in front of my at the time fiance and my children.
Hmm.
She told me multiple times that I was a mistake. I at the time abortion wasn't huge, and you know, she didn't want me. That
Yeah.
was the first one. The second one was I was back in foster care, knowing that my whole biological mother lived in the same state as me, the same city as me. She didn't want me. I felt unwanted.
Hmm.
And the third one was 2023.
Oh wow.
I just hit rock bottom. Again, life just, and you know,
Yeah.
it happened, and
Yeah.
by the grace of God, I'm still here.
Well, I'm glad you're still here, and what you're doing um, is really impressive for you to be able to have survived all that for one, but to have enough strength to heal yourself. I know you said you're still on a healing journey, and I think you will be probably until the day you die, but to also be able to share this just, for the awareness value in it and for other people that may be going through something that's similar to your story or, just has any sort of essence of what's happened to you, to know that they can survive it and they can come out of it and they can be stronger for it, and not only be stronger, but to share that light with others. And it's very impressive and it's very admirable for what you're doing. And I'm really impressed by it. That's
Thank you.
a real reason why I wanted to have you on here. So again, thank you so much for sharing that part of your story.
Thank you. It means a lot to me to be able to use my voice. For a long time, I'm so unheard of. And
Mhm,
people just, they don't, and even now at 40 years old, I have this problem. Like, people don't listen to me,
mhm,
and then when things go where they're like, like, I don't speak because I have a voice. I speak because I know what it is.
right.
And all I really, 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 really want to do is just use my voice to help women and children and men alike. you know we can do this.
Yeah, no, that's your purpose. You're here for a reason. And I think I've said this with the last couple of guests, and it's so true because um man, when you go through those hard times, for me, I mean, I've been through a lot of stuff. My story is layered as well, but cancer was probably the closest that I've been to death. And to have to face,
Oh,
face that type of fear and face that type of reality, knowing that you may no longer be here, is something that's it's something that just changes your perspective on life. And when you're doing it for yourself, it's not always as easy as when you find strength in others. Like for you, like saying that you're doing it to help any man, woman, and child out there. That's something that will literally gives you strength to keep going. It's something that you can't let people down, whether it's your kids or whether it's complete strangers out there that may hear your story and decide not to commit suicide themselves or to find help or seek help. Um, yeah, just being able to find strength in helping others is kind of what the purpose really is, right? That's what drives us.
yeah, absolutely. I absolutely 100% agree. And I'm so big on calling people out. I'm so big on using your voice, because that's all you really have.
Hmm.
I've been voiceless for so long. When I called out my abusers, I got blamed. So
Hmm.
now I'm not a kid anymore. And I'm not stuck in survival mode. I'm not stuck in I'm scared of everybody mode anymore.
Hmm.
So now I can actually, oh, I'm gonna speak up. And God kept me. I'm huge on God.
Hmm.
I'm not ultra religious. I don't practice a religion, but I know that my relationship with my higher power is there.
Right.
God kept me even when I didn't want to be kept.
Hmm.
I know I have a purpose, and I know that He did not give me the experiences that He has given me to not be in my purpose.
Right.
Use my voice. He shut me up for a long time, but now He's given me you got this. It's your turn.
Right. And,
Use
and
your
I don't think
voice to, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say I don't think that even though you might have felt voiceless or you might have felt unheard at the time, like you said, it was all for a reason. So just because nobody was hearing you at that time doesn't mean that your voice wasn't important. Because look at what it's led up to now. And the fact that you went through those things, like you said, so that you can have a story to tell that may inspire others and motivate others to seek help or get out of situations that they shouldn't be in. Things that are unsafe for them.
Absolutely. And I'm hoping that people will take away that, with everything that I say and do in my book and everything that I talk about in my book, and I'm hoping that people will take away from us, like, stop protecting the people who are tearing up our community.
Hmm.
We you know how people be like, oh, Uncle such and such is coming over, put some clothes on.
Hmm.
How the hell we got to put some clothes on in our house? Uncle such and such need to stay his ass at home.
Right. I agree
Let's
100%.
stop. They've ruined us 90s and 80s and 90s and babies, with so much sexual abuse. And they wonder why we're all so hypersexual,
Hmm.
because we were goddamn molested. The whole
Yeah.
generation is swept under the rug generation. And
Yeah.
I don't want that. I don't want my kids to constantly live in that. I don't want my kids, because I got a child old enough. I have two children old enough to bear children. I don't want
Hmm.
them to being that sexual trauma and all of that stuff that, I don't want them to be around those generational
Right. It comes down to the
traumas.
awareness, like you said, the awareness and speaking up. When you see when something is off, we need to speak up on it and let it be known that things are off. We can't just accept it and sweep it under the rug anymore.
Absolutely. And my memoir really calls out all of my abusers by first name.
I like that. Good. They
Everybody
should
kept
be called
saying,
out. Too bad you can't put their ID numbers
oh,
on
what
there.
about, right, and they're like, oh, what about suing for defamation of character? Well, you can only sue, but for defamation of character if it's not true. I'm not lying
Right.
to anybody,
Right.
and what are you going to do? Sue me for my truth?
Right. Exactly.
You shouldn't be who you are.
Yeah,
You
if the
don't,
truth hurts, then you need to change what your reality of truth is. Yeah, obviously, you're doing something wrong, right? Like, if somebody can go tell my story, it might be slightly embarrassing, but there's never anything that's gonna get me in any trouble like that, Like, tell my truth, go ahead. But yeah, if your truth is gonna get you put in jail, then you're doing something wrong.
I just, I've gotten a lot of backlash about my book from a lot of family members.
Hmm.
And it's because of my truth. They want me to put my truth out of their perspective.
Right.
And I'm constantly, including my own biological mother. She's haven't even read my book. She got my book perspective from somebody else who read my book. And
Mhm.
she's calling me like, oh, this is not what happened. I'm like, well, from my perspective, this is what happened. Oh, well,
Right.
you need to change this. No, I'm not changing nothing. You don't get to decide how I write my story.
Right. If you don't agree with it, I guess don't read it. But yeah, don't try to tell you how your perspective is of the story.
I absolutely 100% agree.
So I want to go back to, after those, after the suicide attempts, or, I know one was a little bit more recently, but during the whole time growing up and you felt like there was a moment where you kind of had to, I guess, take your power back or a series of moments. Um, can you tell us, where that started or where you started to feel like you needed to take your power back?
2024.
Okay.
Um, a heartbreak, actually, rejection. I did not realize how much my trauma was affecting everybody else around me. Um,
In what way?
Relationships, my children. I have a control issue. I spent a lot of time not being able to control my own life. Everybody's decisions for me led to destruction in my life. So
Hmm.
when I got old enough to make my own decisions, it just went, nobody can tell me what to do. Nobody can, I have severe control issues. I'm very reactive. I was thinking like, if you do something to me, I have to get you back. You
Hmm.
know, very overly sensitive. My trauma got me rejected. You know, nobody wanted to be around it. Nobody wanted to be around me. I thought I was good though. I thought I was this perfect person, and then I'm just like, oh, mirror right here in
Hmm.
my face. When the mirror hit me in the face, I'm like, ouch,
Right.
and that was
Yeah.
the turning point of, okay, something's got to give. I started
Okay.
seeing myself embracing my inner monster. I started seeing myself just not caring. And I'm a very caring person. And when I
Hmm.
realized like how deep in I was about not caring and how affected my children were and everything like that, and how people were really, really seeing me, although I knew that wasn't me, it just was like something has got to give.
So you spoke about being rejected and deceived because of your trauma. So I want to
Hmm.
know, how did that experience kind of fuel your shift towards healing and sharing your truth?
So I thought I was one way, and when the rejection, because we were together, me and the guy, it was a relationship, you know what I'm saying? Like, I was when he told me, you know what I'm saying, that my behaviors were, we knew it was a trauma response. We knew, I was living in my trauma. When he
Hmm.
told me that was the real reason that we could not be together, you know what I'm saying? And when I realized, like, okay, he's right, it just made me want to do better for myself so that I could stop hurting the people that were trying to care for me and trying
Right.
to love me, so that I could finally get what I've been desiring. And I knew that I needed to heal myself in order to get that. I didn't want to keep hurting what God sent for me.
Hmm. No, that
And,
makes complete sense.
and I mean, I was rejected by the first person I've ever truly, 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 like, no reason loved. There was no
Hmm.
reason for me to love him. He wasn't no extra special, you know what I'm saying? He was all right looking. He wasn't no, he wasn't high value man like most would call themselves. He just
Hmm.
an average dude who looked good, and I had no reason to love him at all. But I loved him and probably will for the rest of my life, you know what I'm saying? But his rejection is what fueled me to it hurt. It hurt opening, like, looking, at it. It really hurt. And I didn't want to do that no more. And I didn't want to
Yeah.
I we went through a situation where I, like, really, 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 really overreacted, which is a trauma response for me,
Yeah.
and it really just, it was bad, you know,
Yeah, trauma does things to your
it
brain
was
that are
bad.
that are really hard to explain sometimes. And like you said, a trauma response is a real thing. Um, it's never an excuse for any sort of negative behavior, but sometimes there's negativity that comes from that, and that's just how literally we go into like self-preservation mode. Like you said, being a control freak or, you know, not wanting others to control what happens with you or the things that you go through. And it makes sense when you go through such terrible events at the hands of other people's decisions, right? So then you're like, no, I'll take control of the wheel and I'll decide which direction I'm gonna go. Sometimes you live by that and you die by that. And of course, we can't all make great decisions, or the best decisions, and things happen sometimes where, we hurt people or, we lose people that we don't want to lose, that we're not ready to lose because of those trauma responses. And in my opinion, that's just why the healing part is it's so vital for growth, right? You can't really give your all to somebody or a situation if you don't have all of yourself already, right?
Absolutely. I truly believe, and learned firsthand, trauma responses may ruin relationships. And it
Yeah,
doesn't necessarily mean just romantic relationships,
right.
friendships, our platonic relationships, business relationships, all kind.
Yep.
It just how can you, you know, be authentically you when you're reacting a certain type of way? You know what I'm saying? Nobody wants to be around somebody who overreact all the time.
Right.
Nobody wants
I
to do
like to
business
say,
with them.
right, exactly. No, I like to say, it's hard to thrive when you've been forced to survive, and um, if you're constantly in survival mode, it's almost impossible to thrive in the full version of you. There is very very few instances or rare occurrences where someone may be able to perform their best when their back is against the wall and all the pressure's on, but that's a rarity. Most people
Mm-hmm,
can thrive when they're in comfort and when they're you know fully when they fully embodied who they are as a person. It's hard to do that when you're
mm-hmm.
forced to be in survival mode all the time.
Absolutely. I just recently shared with somebody how getting out of survival mode actually is painful.
Hmm.
So my body, I've always clenched my jaw. I've always, like, tightened up and embraced for impact. When I became like, when I worked on, like, regulating my nervous system and everything like that, and worked on becoming grounded and everything started hurting really, really bad. Like, I have a lot of, like, when I spent a lot of time in the group homes, like, they body slam you a lot, they bend your body up, they do all type of stuff. So I got in that, my body had to just be an armor all the time for me.
Hmm.
Um, so I just think I have a very high pain tolerance, and it's because I had to have a high pain tolerance based on my experience as a child.
Hmm.
And once I realized that I didn't have to live in that mode anymore, and I let my body relax, oh my God, it hurts so bad.
Yeah.
It hurts so bad, and now like I look at my body and I see all the scars that I have from childhood that come from other people's abuse of me. And now I have 50 tattoos almost, and a lot of them are cover ups for scars from my childhood trauma.
Hmm.
They're all strategically placed,
Yeah.
to cover those scars. Healing. That's why I named my book Healing Hurts Like Hell. It hurts
Mm. Right.
physically, mentally, emotionally, because you're resurfacing everything. Because you can't
Yeah, you
heal
got to
without
process
actually,
it.
bringing it to the forefront.
Right. Yeah,
You heal
exactly. You
without
have to
thinking about
process
it.
it.
Absolutely.
100%. Yeah. Speaking of your memoir, so you said it's called Healing Hurts Like Hell, right?
The healing hurts like hell. Yes.
I like that.
Yeah.
So uh, what inspired you to write the memoir?
So I've
What-
always loved to write. I love
Mhm.
to write. I'm a phenomenal writer. I'm a phenomenal writer. I write poetry. I love to write. And I have been wanting to write for years. I've been wanting to write the book for years. And then one day I just was like, let's do it. In the middle of heartbreak and hurt, it was the one thing that kept me from feeling like I couldn't breathe.
Mhm.
It took me a while, and it didn't take me years like some people did because I just was typing,
Mhm.
it just was so easily able to come out. It was so easily able to just, and it just happened.
Yeah, well, when you're living in that mindset, I'm sure it's easy to kind of, put it to paper, especially if you're already, you have the touch of a writer already. Just you don't have to dig too deep, right? It's all just there for you. You just got to grab it and put it on paper,
Yep. And it just was like, to me, I just felt like I was writing in my journal,
right?
even though I
That
was
makes it
writing
more
on,
personal.
yeah, yeah. I bared my soul in that book, which is something I don't do. Like one of my healing things is opening up more to people. I'm
Hmm.
very, very, very reserved. I'm very, like, me and my kids laugh about it all the time. I'm like extremely, extremely private. I me and my daughters especially laugh about this the most. I will make it seem like I'm telling all of my business and not be telling any of my business.
Yeah.
I'm very like cautious on speaking to people about my life. Um,
Hmm.
and so one of the things that I've been doing is like doing these podcasts, writing my book. I bared my soul in my book, so that I don't have the weight of it on me. It just it needed to come out. It really needed.
Yeah. So, what does telling your story mean to you now at this point in your life?
I feel heard. I feel heard. I feel the feeling that millions of people want to feel. I mean,
Hmm.
excuse me, the feeling of, even though they didn't hear me in childhood, they gonna hear me now. You know,
Right.
when I reported my abuse, nobody did anything. New York State allowed me to get abused for a long time. You know what I'm saying? Because once I became a ward of the state, I was supposed to be taken care of by them. You know,
Right.
they just New York State failed me. New York State failed me, and I'm just here to just hear me roar.
Hmm. Yeah, it's a really unfortunate what you had to go through to get to this point, but again, I don't want to harp on it too much, but I mean, it's like, going through all that pain. Luckily, you're such a strong person and you were able to withstand all that, but now using your story and your experience to help others, to help encourage others, and that's just it's a legendary thing to be doing at this point, having processed it and gone through all the pain, knowing how how hard it can be to survive those moments. Um, there's people out there that are struggling right now. Hopefully somebody that will listen to this and know that you can come out stronger on the other side. You just got to keep pushing and, just keep fighting. Life gets better. It always gets better if you keep moving forward.
I talk a lot about childhood trauma because that's my thing, but I am also a rape survivor, a sexual assault survivor. I am a domestic violence survivor. I am the survivor of a brutal, brutal beating that left me, in a lot of pain for the rest of my life. I have musculoskeletal damage in my back behind it. I mean, I'm stomped out on the curb, beaten with a bat by a
Hmm.
man, like I've almost lost my life. Like and all while doing this as a mom, like,
Hmm.
so I know I talk a lot about trauma and, but I have a lived experience in so many, traumatic ways,
Yeah.
not just childhood trauma.
Yeah. These are things that people don't even understand that are going on in our world, so it is, again, unfortunate that you went through it, but it's a great thing that you're shining a light on it, because people need to understand that these things can happen. Young women, or really young men as well. You guys need to watch who you get in relationships with. You need to watch who you form bonds and associations with, because everybody is
Absolutely.
not. You can't identify a predator or an abuser just by the way that they look, right? They look just like us. They look just like everybody else. And then over time, they kind of learn to manipulate you and take control of things. And then before you know it, you're in a domestic violence situation, or, a rape situation, or what have you. So, um,
I and earlier today, and it just made me tickle. It just tickled me so bad. Somebody said trauma bonding is a good thing sometimes because you're bonding over trauma, right? Which just
mhm,
made me so, like, it made my ass itch, for lack of a better term, because that's not what trauma bonding is. Trauma bonding is when you meet someone who is a narcissistic or manipulative abuser who uses your trauma as a weapon to guide you through abuse and latch on to you and let you latch onto them and allow them to abuse you. That's what trauma bonding is. Not two people
right,
who have trauma and say, "Hey, let's get together." That's
right.
people who have trauma saying, "Hey, let's get together."
Yeah, and those people usually start off as the sweetest, nicest ones, right? That's how they kind of get you to open up and share with them. You think they're the most amazing person in the world, and you open up and share these things that happened, and they're like, "Oh, well, let me use that as a weapon." Like you said, let me use that against this person, and they
Yep,
find all your triggers, and yeah, before you know it, you're stuck in a situation that's hard to get out of,
yep.
or dangerous to get out of. It's or a combination of those things. It's so unfortunate.
It's very unfortunate, and it's happening to everybody. It's not gender inclusive.
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's why I caught myself when I said young women, but it happens to men and women alike. It happens to everybody. It can happen to anybody. I've actually
Yep.
been the victim of a narcissistic abuser myself. I'll share more of that story later, but it's very manipulative things, and sometimes you don't even recognize that it's happening. It's the people on the outside that'll see it and be like, "Well, why are you dealing with this person? Why are you
Mhm.
still going back to this person?" And they just have a hold on you. You can't really explain it. You think that it's love, you think that it's how it's supposed to be, but it's just manipulative, gaslighting, controlling behavior. And it's like you're drawn back to that until you become fully healed. You're going to keep getting drawn back into that. You got to find some self-value and some self-worth.
That's funny that it's two things that you said that just first thing's the self worth thing. I didn't hear the term self worth until I was well into my 30s.
Hmm.
And another thing you said is about the young men and with domestic violence. Here's the thing that I talk a lot about this as well is how our young men are violated at a young age and nobody blinks an eye. Nobody it's a badge of honor when young men start screwing at 12.
Hmm.
People don't realize that the gender doesn't change the crime. Having sex with a
Right.
child, no matter if you're a man or a woman, is a crime.
Right.
Men have a bad habit of telling young boys when they screw the babysitter, like, boy, you better put an S on your chest,
Hmm.
instead of realizing that, oh, Wait, he's a victim of rape.
Yeah, why does this
Let's
grown
get
woman want
him
to be with
some
a
help.
young boy, right? Like that, there's something wrong with that woman.
Women predators are very, very, very underrepresented in our community. Like,
Right,
well, not underrepresented, but like they need to be talked about more.
right. Yeah, they think it's
It
all
needs to
just
be talked more.
yeah, being predators towards women. But yeah, it goes both ways. I always say, no matter what it is, whether it's a race thing, whether it's a violence thing, whether it's whatever, like business decisions, like if you can't, if you can flip the script and just change, the kind of person that you're talking about, and it's unacceptable, then it's unacceptable no matter what. Just because a man being a predator to a woman seems so bad, a woman being a predator to a man is just as bad. It just the perception of it is a lot different, right?
And think about it. Those traumatized men are the ones that lead the community.
A lot of times, yeah.
Right? So let's even use incarcerated men, right? They go into these jails, prisons, whatever, they get treated any kind of way. They come home and they take it out on the women in their communities, their moms, their
Hmm.
sisters, their wives, their girlfriends, baby moms, whoever. You know what I'm saying? That's they went through a trauma, they come home, they don't get no help. But then they hear other men be like, oh, I went through it, you'll be all right.
Hmm.
All right. You know what I'm saying? But they're the ones that we're expected to let lead our community.
Yeah,
Those are the ones we're expected to say, you know, yes, sir, to, or whatever, like,
yeah, yeah. No, I think just in general, people in general need to seek help more often. But I think amongst men, it needs to happen a lot more often. A lot of times, men are expected to kind of suppress those things and not seek help and just deal with it, right? Just like
mhm,
just handle it and just man up or whatever. That's why there's the term man up, right? No one says go, woman up. Just be a woman about it. It's always be a
mhm,
man about it. Be a man about it. Just brush it under the rug. And unfortunately, that's probably why we have so many men that are predators and that are, abusers and, can't have healthy relationships because they're not healed themselves. They need to seek help, whether they realize it or not. They need to seek help and they need to process those things.
absolutely agree. I push mental health on men constantly, constantly. Sometimes, like when I do like TikTok lives sometimes, and I always, anytime there's a man that comes into my panel, hey, how you doing today? You good
Hmm.
today? I'm gonna constantly check them, constantly, check on the mental health because men are undervalued in our community when it comes to mental health and everything.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
And
And
they,
that goes for everybody, but again, men tend to not want to seek it as much. But I think
mm-hmm,
everybody needs to be seeking that help. Everybody needs to go see somebody, talk these things out, somebody that's going to have an unbiased perception of you, someone that won't judge you. It can't always be a friend or a relative or anything like that. Go see a professional. Go seek help.
yeah, absolutely. Go seek help.
Yeah,
It does.
there's no shame in that, right?
It doesn't make you weak. If anything, it makes you strong to admit that you know you need the help and you're willing
I
to
agree.
use tools and resources to actually get the help.
I
Get the
agree
help.
100%.
And
Um,
get away from the generation that is hurting you. Because you
right.
can't heal from generational trauma and hurt if you're in the generation's space that hurt you.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we got to do it for the future generations. That's what this is all about. That's why we're doing this. That's why I'm doing this. I know that's why you wrote your memoir. It's really, of course we can help people that are older than us and past generation, but the future generations need to understand that these things happen. It's not your fault for one. It's almost never your fault whether you were placed into a situation or you made an uninformed decision. We have to learn from those things and move on. We have to process those things and understand that you were victimized. You were placed into a situation that you didn't know what was going to happen. So these things that happen to you are not your fault. You just have to go and process them and let it out, and heal yourself so that you can, like we said, step into your whole being, find your purpose, whatever that is, and then move forward.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And you mentioned having an advocacy platform. I want to know a little bit more about that and what kind of impact you're hoping to make for others who have experienced trauma or abuse.
So the all in all, I'm in the process of creating a non-for-profit foundation. I don't want
Mhm.
to, bit too much information about it or anything, but the goal is to, again, change change the trajectory of how things and trauma is looked at in our community, in the world, period, in the law. That's a huge thing because laws are made for children, but then as soon as, there's laws being made that are not protecting these children, especially kids in foster care. Um,
Mhm.
I'm hoping that I want to heal. Just that's it. I want to heal. I want to be able to use my voice to allow other people to use their voice.
Yeah. Um,
Um, Go ahead.
yeah, I was just gonna say, the whole foster care system, I don't know, I'm not a foster myself. I haven't known very many foster children growing up, but uh, it seems disproportionate the amount of success stories that come from it versus the amount of trauma stories that come from it. So if there's anybody out there that is a foster child or has grown up in a foster situation that wants to share your story, or or just let us know in the comments if your foster situation was good, bad, or indifferent, because I hear nothing, almost nothing but bad stories coming from foster situations. And I know that can't be all of the stories. So I'm sure there's good ones out there. It sounds really scary, but sometimes being a foster is for the better, right? If you have a parent that's not able to take care of you or is not in a good situation themselves, sometimes people need to be placed in foster care, and it can end up being a great story. It just seems like sometimes, a lot of times, I hear bad stories coming from that. So I would love to hear more good stories coming from foster homes, if there are any out there. Um,
Here, so often when people say you should be lucky that your adopted parents adopted you when you were an orphan. And I asked them, well, what at what cost?
right,
Was my dignity worth it? Was it worth was should I be grateful for the abuse?
right,
I just recently made a video on TikTok and it said, not everybody's fostering situation is okay. Not everybody got the good parent. You know what I'm saying?
right,
Just because you're a good foster parent doesn't make everybody a good foster parent.
right.
I'm saying, and I made another one that said, if you made it out of foster care, okay, you're really lucky. It's
Yeah,
not that
it
easy,
seems like it. Yeah,
and I let me know what you did. Let's connect because maybe we can help some people.
yeah, and that's what we need to do. We need to be trying to help as many people as possible.
And it doesn't, and age, we know age matters. You know what I'm saying? Because if you heal the older generation, the younger generation too, we heal everybody.
Hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And
Yeah,
it just
domino effect,
so
right?
much better for our kids.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, we have to be willing to plant the seed that, for the plant that we won't see grow. That tree might not grow for another couple of generations, but the seed needs to be planted, right? We can't just sit here
Yep.
and just be like, oh, I'm just going to keep watering the grass or whatever, the short-term stuff. We have to think about long term. If we keep allowing these things to happen, allowing abuse to be brushed under the rug, then it's just going to keep happening over and over again. All these things need to be addressed some way or another. I don't have the answers. So if anybody else out there has some ideas, I mean, we just need to keep spreading the word, sharing the message, and spreading awareness, because that's what it's really all about.
Absolutely. It's spreading awareness, using your voice, using your voice. People fail to realize that people resonate more with people who have been through what they've been through.
Hmm.
Nobody gives a damn about your degree.
Hmm.
Okay. A lived experience is just as important in human service work or, this type of work that we do, advocacy, humanitarian work. Lived experience means so much to the people who need the help.
Yeah, one would even argue that it's more valuable, the lived experience versus the degrees
Yeah.
and
I
the
don't give
school
a
books.
damn about you read in the book. I could read the same book. I ain't illiterate.
Right.
I just don't want to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to go take notes.
Right. To
I
be put
don't
in
want to
debt,
do it.
right?
Thousands of dollars to be in debt, and now I can help you
Yeah.
versus, yeah, I know what you're going through. Maybe here's some insight.
Yeah, no, we have this platform. It's completely free, and that's what we're doing. We're spreading the message and spreading the word. I'm willing to talk to anybody that has gone through trauma. I'll share my traumas with anybody that finds value in it and value in, uh, the comeback story, basically. The same with you, like being able to heal after all the things that you've been through. Again, we've talked about it. Life is a constantly evolving thing, right? And the trauma that you've survived, the traumas that you've survived are probably not the only things that you're going to go through that are going to be traumatic for you. We're all going to continuously have these things that happen to us. So we're always going to be continuously healing. And there's
Hmm.
value in that. There's value in knowing that you can make it through these things. You can survive these things. And while it is unfortunate to have to go through so much pain and so much, hurt, there's value in those things because you're building strength, you're building resilience, you're building character in those moments so that the next time you do face those things, you have what it takes to survive and get through.
Exactly.
No, you're good. So again, healing is an ever evolving thing, but you've seem to be a lot more healed now, obviously, than you were as your younger self. So I'm curious, what would you say to your younger self now? The little girl who was hurting, if you could speak to her now, what would you say?
It's not your fault. You are not what they want you to be. You are not a reflection of people's perception of you.
Hmm.
You will be okay.
Even though it doesn't feel like it, right?
Even though you don't feel it good. And the last thing I would say is it's okay to not be okay as long as you grow through what you go through.
Yep, that's a fact. That's a fact. You can't sit there and play victim all the time. Even if you are victimized, you can still use those moments for growth and evolution, right? And
Absolutely.
and that's really what it's all about. Because like I was just saying, we're gonna go through it again. So if we sit here keep playing victim and acting like woe is me, and having that sort of perception, then you're just going to be just as weak as you were the next time you go through one of these things. So by learning and growing what you go through, uh, you'll be stronger. You'll be much more well equipped to go through these things, and they won't be as hard on us. And then passing these things along, right?
Absolutely.
um, so I just want to maybe send a message to anybody that may be watching or listening to this. For anyone who might feel broken or alone, what would you want them to know right now?
There's someone somewhere who has your story. Don't be afraid to share it. You never know who your story can help. And this is the moment to start healing. There's never a wrong moment to start healing.
Right.
Don't heal for anybody else, do it for you. Don't heal for your children alone. Do it for you. You deserve it just as much as they do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I just want to add to that there is no perfect time, right? And you're never going to feel like waiting for the perfect time. You'll never have that time. The perfect time is now when you're thinking about it, right? You can't wait. You can't keep waiting for strength to come, for comfort to come. You just got to take a leap of faith and start that healing process.
And don't let nobody keep your past in your face.
Right.
Trauma may come in destructive behaviors. People who aren't healed will throw your destructive behaviors back in your face. It is okay to say, you know what, that's not me anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
If that's the me that you still see, you cannot have it. You can't have me.
Yeah. The
I'm
connection
I'm
is
I'm no
terminated right
longer gonna
there.
sit right then and there. I won't
Yeah.
sit in here while you try to make me feel worse than I've made myself feel. I don't need your help. If you want to help, be positive, be productive. But if you want to
Yeah.
just beat me down, you have got to go. I don't live in 2012.
Yeah, and those acknowledgments of our past are what will give us that power, right? And just knowing that, I may
Absolutely.
have made mistakes in the past, that I may have made uninformed decisions, I may have made dumb or bad decisions, but that's not me anymore. I've grown, I've evolved from there. So yeah, you're not going to use that and hold it up against me. That's not me anymore.
I'm sorry. I apologize, you know, but I can't take it back.
Right,
And I'm gonna sit here and allow you to make me feel worthless after all the worth that I had to find in myself.
right.
I don't care who you are. You can be my child. I said I was sorry.
Yeah, that's what I always say. Titles don't matter. Don't, for anybody out there, don't make excuses for your mom, your brother, your cousin, your father, your sister. It doesn't matter who it is. It's not about who they are to you. It's about how they are to you. It's
Yep,
about how they treat you and how you feel when you're with these people. If you don't feel right, if you don't feel welcome, if you don't feel loved, eliminate them from your life or at least distance yourself.
distance yourself, but you're not gonna sit around. And some people do it all the time. They sit around the people that hurt them or
Hmm.
did something, and then when the people want to, move forward, they want to stay in that moment. You just no.
Yeah, that's that unhealed behavior, like we were talking about before, where it's like if you haven't healed, then you're going to keep falling back into the same trap. You know,
Yeah,
if you haven't acknowledged those things and your prior mistakes and your prior shortcomings, then you're going to keep falling for the same thing. And you got to have that self-worth, that self-acknowledgement, and that growth and evolution to know that you can't be going through those same things over and over again that are not good for you. They don't serve you.
absolutely. Absolutely, 100%. If it's not serving you, if it's not filling up your cup, it has no access to you
Right.
at all. Healing, it gets lonely because those friends that you had while you lived in your trauma may not necessarily be the friends that you have while you're starting to heal because you're gonna be like, oh, dang, okay, yeah, you're really like that.
Yeah, you start to realize that they got some healing to do themselves, right? And maybe that's why you bonded in the past, two unhealed people bonding over their issues or whatever. But once you become elevated to another level, you can't stoop back down, and hang around and associate with those unhealed people. It doesn't
That's one
serve
of
you.
those, not everybody can go.
Right. That's true.
Not everybody can go. And although you may want them to go,
Right.
they can't.
Yeah, that's the thing too. You got to learn. It's not always going to be the people and the way that you want things to go, but you just got to know what's best for you.
Absolutely.
So my last question for you, we made it all the way to the end. As far as your healing, I want to know what's the most powerful thing that healing has taught you about yourself.
That I'm worthy of all things good, regardless to my past mistakes, regardless to how much I did not care for myself then. I am still worthy of a good love. I'm still worthy of good friends. I am worthy. I'm valuable.
Absolutely, that's beautiful. I love it. Yeah, really amazing stuff. I really agree wholeheartedly. I really want to thank you for your time and for sharing the parts of your story that you did share. I know you have a memoir out. If you want to share your social media handles or any info about anything that you want to promote, now would be the time to do it.
So I have created a lived experience counsel firm. I am on TikTok under High Thriving. Um, and again, my memoir, Healing Hurts Like Hell,
Okay, awesome.
available on Amazon Kindle as well as in paperback.
Awesome. And I'll be sure to put those things in the description for anybody that wants to get links to those things and make sure you support. Again, your story has been amazing, and I'm hoping that it can really help spread awareness. Um, and let me just say, for everybody listening out there, that Naisha's story reminds us that even in the most silent, unseen pain, there's still a chance to rise. She turned the unthinkable into a message, her voice into a movement. And if her strength spoke to you today, please share this video with someone who needs it. And remember, your trauma is not your ending. It might just be your beginning. This is Trauma Saved My Life. Until next time, I appreciate you guys watching. Peace out, guys.